Cool. Okay, start the broadcast, please. Why won't it start it? All right, it's not starting. It won't, the button is not working.
Bob, what's the M?
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning.
Market Federation. Okay.
We're just waiting for a few more people to join us, and we're going to have quite a big crowd today, so I'm sure you're all going to enjoy what we have for you today. But we're going to be starting in about 4 or 5 minutes, so if you want to take a minute, go grab yourself a cup of coffee before we get started. We'll be with you shortly. It is 10 o'clock. We are going to wait just a couple more minutes. We do have a few more people looking to join us. So if you'll just relax and give us a minute, we'll get started shortly. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started now. I do expect some more people will join us as we're going along, but I don't want us to run too late. So let's go ahead and get started. I would like to welcome everybody to our webinar today. Today we're talking about learning to look around, getting your head in the game. And this is the first webinar in our marketing assessment series for this winter. I'm sure you're going to enjoy today's presentation, and we'll look forward to giving you our future presentations for this coming winter. Before we get started, I do have a couple of housekeeping things I want to go over, and then we'll get started. At the end of this week, you'll get an email with a link to an evaluation of this webinar via SurveyMonkey. We'd like you to take a few minutes to answer the questions that we have on this survey. It's important to us because we need to assess the quality of the programming, and we need to provide data for reporting to our funders, which is USDA's SARE Professional Development Program. It's also very important for us as we're assessing the value of the presentations we're bringing to you. It allows us to make adjustments on future ones. So if you please just take a few minutes and complete that evaluation. Everyone today was emailed today's presentation. We hope that's going to help you to follow along as Bob goes through the program today and help to facilitate your note-taking. And as many of you, I'm sure, have noticed, you have joined the webinar in listen-only mode. Everyone is muted, and that allows this very large audience that we're going to have today to be able to hear the presentation clearly without any background noise. If you have any questions as we go through today's presentation, please type them in your chat or question box that you see below your names there in the control panel. Those questions will then come to me, and we'll be able to get them to Bob to answer for you. The presenter will break at points during his presentation for questions, and your questions will then be read aloud to Bob so that so everyone can hear the questions, but also so that Bob can answer them for everyone to hear. At the end of the presentation, we'll also have a Q&A session. Again, all your questions will need to be typed in. They'll be read to the presenter, to Bob, so that everyone can hear both the question and answer. We're a little concerned that with such a large crowd today that maybe we won't have time to get through all the questions. If that's the case, what we'll do is have Bob answer them offline, and then we'll put them in a Q&A and post it on our website. And that website is nyfarmersmarket.com. Okay? With that, we want to welcome you again to our Marketing for Profit Tools for Success webinar series. This is a 3-year project hosted by the Farmers Market Federation of New York and the New York Farm Viability Institute and funded by Northeast SARE's Professional Development Program. The series of webinars will explore marketing concepts and provide tools to help farmers better understand their market options and help them to be more successful and profitable in the marketing venues they choose. This series of sessions will explore market assessment. So we'll be looking at factors that make up the market environment you'll be operating in and how you steer your business towards success within that market. Our next series, beginning in January, will explore customer assessment, learning who your ideal customers are and how to present your business to your target customer for maximum sales and profits. Each of these series and webinars will be developed into a curriculum to accompany each webinar, and will allow extension educators to use the materials in workshops and trainings in their own counties and regions. You'll find this curriculum and the webinars on our website, again, nyfarmersmarket.com. So before we get started, I'm going to turn this over to Dave Grusenmeyer from the New York Farm Viability Institute to introduce today's speaker. Dave?
Okay, great. Thanks, Diane. Today's speaker, which I'm excited to hear, is Bob Bucheri. Bob learned marketing and communications working with clients such as Johnson & Johnson, General Foods, and Pepsi-Cola. Most recently, he's been involved with economic development for communities such as Seneca Falls and Schenectady in New York, and up until January of this year, served as the president of the board for the Farmers Market Federation of New York. He's the founder of the Seneca Wine Tour, which is the first and only public bus route touring wineries in the nation. A founder of Finger Lakes Cork and Fork Culinary Expo, which joins restaurants, food producers, farmers, and cooperative extension personnel in a setting to show and instruct about everything food in New York State. He's currently living with his wife in Norfolk, Virginia, where he's working with many grassroots organizations dedicated to local foods and serving the local community. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob to fill in some of the gaps in the introduction and continue with the presentations. Bob, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate it, and it's a wonderful introduction. I wish I could take you to my next job interview. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming.
Bob, I need to interrupt you for a second. Your presentation is not yet up on the screen.
Oh, okay. Excuse me.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. And any other glitches, please shout out. Our intention today is to talk about how to perform a reasonable marketing assessment, or getting your head in the game. Our intention here is to provide guidelines as to how a business owner or entrepreneur can get clear of the clutter, get an impartial, business-focused assessment of the conditions and opportunities in their markets. While this may seem simplistic, we are all to some degree biased in our view and in need of independent validation of those forces which influence our business and impact our bottom line. We will present the most critical components of such analysis, and will recommend some sources and techniques to try to properly and impartially assess the impact they have upon our business. This is by no means a comprehensive view of this activity. Any of you who have been to the library or Barnes & Noble business section realize there's probably about, something in the neighborhood of 100 titles on marketing, branding, etc., some of which are very good, but all of which try to assess this overall opportunity. So we're going to try and focus it on some very particular elements of what to look for, where to find it, and most importantly, how to make this assessment an ongoing part of doing business. First of all, you deserve to know who I am, and David's introduction was pretty comprehensive. I've served as the Director of Advertising at Chase Pitkin, Regional Marketing Manager for Pepsi-Cola, and 25 years experience in marketing communications, worked with the Seneca Falls Farmers Market and the Farmers Market Federation of New York. I've been in the trenches of marketing communication for nearly 3 decades. Worked on local, regional, and national businesses, on strategic communications, planning, new product introduction, competitive planning, and local economic development, of which I've considered local foods to be a critical component of that development. And certainly we've had some success with that in the Seneca Falls Farmers Market and within the Federation. So what is a marketing assessment? Simply put, it's a fair, concise, unbiased review of consumer perceptions. Well, if I tell you exactly what it is, I'll probably show off my own prejudices and bias, but the fact remains that there is an image out there for every business and product which those of us on the inside need to understand so as to be more effective in influencing consumer perceptions and activity. More precisely, it's the need to stop inhaling your own exhaust and get some clear vision. This may be challenging for some, especially large, entrenched businesses. Kodak is probably a wonderful local example. And the greater challenge is to keep the information as concise as may be reasonable. Focusing on the most critical elements allows the business owner or to properly align their business with the market conditions and consumer expectations while creating a process that is easy to update and assess on an ongoing basis. When I worked with Wegmans, the perception was that thanks to the Shoppers Club card, we knew everything there was to know about our consumers. The fact of the matter was, the data that was collected was so huge and so ungainly that it was very difficult to actually track individual consumers through the system, except by largest possible pools, how much total money they spent, things of that nature. And updating it was a nightmare, hardly done at all, as a matter of fact. So the danger is that we spend so much time trying to improve our business that we forget to actually run the business. But there is a meshing attitude between your marketing activity and managing your business. So the start may seem daunting, but the goal is to forge an easily managed process or list of resources which can be accessed easily time and again to properly identify the challenges, react to them, and continuously build the business. Why is it important? Well, ask Kodak, Sears, Lehman Brothers, Circuit City. Yes, and I'll admit, Chase Pitkin, American Motors, Linens and Things, Borders Books. The list is huge, and it is representative of these entrenched businesses, one that is so large or removed from the direct consumer contact that it itself cannot see the end point or the end state of its product or its perception. There's a great insight that the politicians who speak of improving the economy don't know what the price is for a quart of milk or a dozen eggs. It's a pretty good illustration of the removal from the process. A company may ask for a fair market assessment, but then puts the question to their own lawyers or their bankers or their distributors or their ad agencies, each of which have a direct interest to some aspect of that business and will, consciously or otherwise, defend their own territory. That view, by and large, is useless to the process and can be given far too much credence because of the perception of, oh, well, nobody knows our business better than our lawyer, ad agency, whatever, when in fact they're probably one of the worst sources of information for the purposes of developing a true, unbiased assessment. This is what getting your head in the game or clearing the air means, steering clear of this kind of natural bias. In this way, the direct marketing small business is in a much better position than any of those named on this slide, failed or failing companies. So the question becomes, what is it that we need to know? Well, everything. Okay, that's simple. But you must prioritize the data. It seems like we need to determine everything, but for an effective marketing assessment, what we really need to do is to set priorities. We will review each of these essential elements under this first bullet, but encourage you to look at your own business and conditions to determine which are of greatest priority and therefore deserving of greatest attention. And of course, these priorities may change. As unfortunately illustrated over the last couple of years, a natural disaster can change the landscape literally and figuratively in a moment's time, and certainly requires reassessment of opportunities and resources. But by and large, these are trends. These are pretty well entrenched elements of marketing and doing business, and the priorities will be different. One business may be facing an aging consumer that will eventually peter out and leave them with no customers. Another may find themselves in a position where competitors seem to be dropping out of the sky and stealing business from them. And yet another may suffer from the fact that their product is good and their pricing seems fair, but their consumer has no idea who they are. This business has no brand image, and so it cannot foster word-of-mouth business growth nor repeat business. And we'll talk more on that later. But let's take a look at each of these along the way and keep in mind that you need to process the information based upon your own business experiences, your market conditions, etc. So where do you find this data? Everywhere. Once you know what you're looking for, you can get on the internet, a huge advantage for us all, and it can provide census data, demographic information, product sales and trends, pricing, even uncover existing perceptions concerning your own business. If there's one piece of advice you take out of this entire program, this seminar, and this idea of marketing assessment, get on Google and do a search for your business and see where your name is showing up and what people may be saying about you. You may be surprised what you find. One farmer who did this exercise found that their farm was listed on 20 different local farms lists, and they only remembered submitting information to about 7 of them. Another was surprised to find that their farm name, which had been established several generations ago, was being used by 5 other farms in different parts of New York State. But at the end of the day, some of the best information comes to your business, calls on the phone, or contacts you in some way nearly every day. Your customer. Who are they? What do they look like? What general conclusions can you reach? And how are they different from one another? Yeah, it's a little like Sherlock Holmes trying to deduce the best information, but if you really keep your eyes open, if you really build up a sensitivity to reading the critical data, it really is fairly elementary, Watson, and I promise that's my last really bad joke, okay? So in consumer perceptions, what do your customers know or think of your business? What are the elements that they feel are most important? This is the kind of information that you're going to find to be absolutely vital along the way, and covers a lot of information that you may or may not be able to act on immediately. But think about your own habits. Why do we pick one product over another? At a grocery store, for instance. Is it the price? Is it the packaging? Is it the position on the shelf? Is it past experience? Or are there some other factors which influence us? Research from Pepsi-Cola shows that 50% of the population will only buy Coke or Pepsi when choosing a cola. And that group is nearly equally split, and nothing will make a Pepsi drinker a Coke drinker or vice versa. The other 50% has no idea what they are buying until they get to the soda aisle, and mostly they're influenced by price. Consumers make a large part of the decision as they approach the product. How do they behave in that approach? Are they studying the display, reading every price? Check the eye movement. You can tell these things. Are they glancing across the display relatively quickly, which may be an assessment of quality or selection? Are they engaging you in conversation in an attempt to determine whether you are worthy of their business? The majority of people come by on the web, at the market, in the stores, and kick the tires, but don't buy the product at that time. Yet we can still learn a lot about them and assess how they may react to our offerings. Even in something as impersonal as a web page, you can determine how long they're staying, what they're most interested in, how many of them respond to specials or coupons or events, and what kind of people respond to these things. Something I learned a long time ago in the New York City subway. Assess everyone around you, but don't stare at them. That could be a little problematic. But you can immediately learn age. You can have a pretty good guess at income, pretty good guess at, well, in New York City at least, a pretty good guess at gender. You can determine race, general demeanor, perception, even their level of literacy or expertise with the product can be assessed if you're paying attention. And then, of course, there's the great option of talking to the consumers. I know it's tiring to greet every customer, and I know some customers are almost frightened by the term, "Can I help you?" You know, and I've noticed in the past, I don't know, 3, 4 months, many of you have too, that now when you walk into Lowe's or Tops or Target or Rite Aid, the workers no longer say, "Can I help you?" Many of them, many large retailers now have their workers saying things like "Good morning" or "Welcome to our store" or "Glad to see you," because these phrases engage the customer without necessarily forcing them to respond to a question. But once engaged, you need to drill into them. You need to learn whatever you can. And whatever you learn, you have to retain it and cross-reference it. Some things don't even require them to respond, as alluded to earlier. But you must be prepared to gather data on every one of them. Are they alone? Or are they shopping with family or companions? Are they dressed for office work or church or manual labor of some sort? Male or female, age? Did they bring a bag with them? And have they already made a purchase? And if so, what have they purchased before they've reached your business? If you can engage them, find out what they want, what they expect of you. There are some simple questions which can help you with existing and with new customers. If they've been there before, did they have a positive experience and with your product and with your service? If they are new customers, are they just passing through or are they here to stay? Some of this is inherent in the location. A market in Lake George on the 4th of July will have fewer local residents than a Wednesday morning market in June in Seneca Falls, for instance. But each poses challenges and opportunities to grant you insight before you speak to a single person. When I moved out here to Virginia, I had the experience of sampling the local markets, and I went to a market in Virginia Beach, 1 block off of the honky-tonk strip of souvenir shops and hotels and whatnot. And it was a small market, probably about 12 vendors, 12, 15 vendors, and it had 2 produce vendors. It had a cheese guy. It had a soap vendor, and it had a couple of seafood vendors, which is a nice addition that I get out here. But the thing that amazed me was there were 5 restaurants handing out coupons. Some were providing samples, etc. And I thought, boy, that's really weird. However, they're surrounded by hotels. The majority of people wandering through were tourists, not residents. So they saw a great business building opportunity, and certainly it reflected that. So even the market you're in can give some insight into the type of consumer that might be frequenting that market or expected at that market. So that's the broad base involving consumer perceptions and researching your consumer. If there are any questions along the way, please feel free to type them in. We are prepared to respond to some along the way. There is a large group of you, as Diane alluded to, which is wonderful, but certainly this data can trigger things that you may need more clarification on. So please feel free for submission if you wish as we go forward. So as you gather this data, you of course want to put it to use, and how to best put it to use. As mentioned earlier, Googling your company, your market, your product is so very important. In 1972, the leading diet supplement in this country was a chocolate wafer candy named, unfortunately for them, AIDS. Yeah, it's long gone. Were you selling spinach in 2008 or tomatoes in 2009? We've had a range of products affect food, and it seems as if it's happening on a weekly basis now. But almost as importantly, your name, your product, your company, they all have similar or exact duplicates out there. You cannot get too much information on what is going on, but it doesn't mean that it in and of itself has to overwhelm you. You can receive this information on an ongoing basis by customizing things like Google News and by assessing elements around Facebook and Twitter, etc. And you have to be somewhat selective. I mean, if there's a Facebook page from somebody called The Loser who has 6 likes and every one of them has the same last name, I wouldn't be too worried about what they have to say. But on the other hand, if the local food reporter is publishing material about your product, your market, or your business, you need to know. You also need to know on the larger scale, because when you're performing your business, when you're selling your product, somebody's going to walk up and says, "What are you doing to protect us from the terrible pomegranate problem?" And the worst thing is, I don't know. But now you could push back with that. What have you heard? Or what's the latest? But at the same time, the better armed you are, the better prepared you are. Because there's always some sort of food scare, seemingly, going on out there. It's the sort of news that gets people to watch TV and buy newspapers and go online to comment and engage and respond, what have you. I don't know why we respond so heavily to bad news, but we do. We all enjoy good news, or I like to think so. You ever look at the weather when it's a day like today, 65 degrees and sunny? Yeah. But storm approaching or what have you, they're even putting the Weather Channel on in the sports bars because that's what we need to know. It's urgent to us. Even your name. Yeah, it's your name, but the chances are there are others somewhere in the world with the same name. Bucherri is pretty unique. It's one of the reasons I think I'm memorable, but the strange thing is there's an exact same spelling Bucherri clan out there that's part of a mob family. No, they are no relation, okay, at all. But sometimes I'm glad they're there. No, that's not true. The idea is that I like to know where the Bucherri's at, because undoubtedly every job application I make, every proposal I make, that name's being Googled. So I'd like to know what's going on with that name. So don't think that there aren't things out there that can trip you up. You can set Google News to give you reports on your product, your locality, your name, whatever it is that you want. And then every day or every other day when you check Google News, you'll get a headline specific to that topic. It is a great, great tool. Of course, we also have to be able to act on it. And we don't have the time to cover all aspects of a crisis communications plan here, except to say that every business needs one. It's been discussed, the food safety guidelines that the Farm Market Federation was involved in formulating speaks about having a crisis communication plan. At the end of the day, you don't want an informal one of, oh, I guess I might do something like whatever. But you need a formal written document that outlines what you will do, how you will act, and you have to make certain, absolutely certain, that every employee or family member, anyone who might answer the phone or man the booth or sell the product, knows what is expected in the time of a crisis. You have to be able to identify yourself based on the information that you get and the market information, the consumer information that you gather. You need to be memorable without being annoying. You know, we all remember the car dealer who screams at the TV, airline company who, you know, boasts lowest rates or whatever. But are we really engaged with what they're saying? But there are many other ways to identify yourself without screaming at people. It could be the color of the shirts. It could be the type of produce that you grow. It could involve, you know, signage, distinct signage, typeface, size, etc. Recipe cards, literature that's distributed. It could be a 6-foot-tall styrofoam chicken that you take everywhere with you. Something must be memorable so that people will remember and be able to find you for repeat business. But most important in that is to be consistent. People are bombarded by sales messages every day, not just advertising, but street signs, conversations, news reports contain information that influence purchase. Your message has to be consistent. Your appearance, in terms of the location of your ads, the colors used, the verbiage, the typeface, must be as much the same each time, and you must carry it through everything you do so the consumer can identify you to others, so that that word of mouth, that valuable personal recommendation, will spur people to come back or to bring others or cause others to come purchase. You can't afford to be the third booth on the left or the place with the great bread, because those businesses don't have enough identity or enough of a sustainable identity to be able to thrive. You have to be able to assess competitive interests. If one market, farm, what have you, suffers a setback, can you act on that information? No one should run their business solely based on competition. Because if you do so, you spend a lot of time trying to understand competition and chasing after them, which means they're ahead of you. But you must be aware of what they are doing, how it may affect your business. Try to figure out whether or not it's working for them. There's all kinds of pricing strategies. There's all kinds of value-added components that could be involved. And as with so much of this process, it's easy to get obsessed and overwork the question of the competition and overemphasize a single aspect of it, for instance. If they're pricing their product higher or lower, try to make an educated guess how they're doing it and whether or not it's working for them. Try not to respond to a single element at a single time, but see how pricing may adjust or value-added programs may evolve from one location to another or from one product to the next. It could mean they're incredibly savvy. It could mean they're winging it and hoping for the best. What value information they're using can also be an insight. If recipe cards are popular, and certainly they are, I've used them myself and find them to be a great spur to purchase. Maybe you can give away actual cards instead of a Xerox sheet. Or maybe the recipes can have a unique twist to them, 100% organic, or a theme like Middle Eastern food or Mexican or whatever. There's a lot of popular cuisines on the horizon always. There's a way to tap your product into them. That's something that you can create and defend for yourself. Maybe in your particular case, your particular farm, stand, business, maybe buried in a particular product. The okra was really good this year. Maybe you can afford to give it away with the purchase of a tomato. Or, you know, everyone loves free. It's the #1 word in advertising and marketing. And you can build it into your pricing so that although your tomatoes are a wee bit more expensive, look at this bok choy I got for free. People get very, very excited about that and perceive a better value because of it. But again, most of all, it's the consistency that's necessary to really make this work. And trying to figure out how they are doing shouldn't hurt how you are doing. There are competitive interests which you trust. You can ask people, how you doing? What's going on? And learn from them. Share info. develop parallel plans. You know, not all not all competition is evil and intent on destroying your business. Although, you know, being a product of the Bronx public school system, I've learned paranoia is a good thing. So I always have that as an opening assumption. But when I was working for Pepsi, once a year I'd have lunch with the marketing director of Coca-Cola, see how things were going. And, you know, we'd lie to each other in some things, but we also provided each other with reasonable input about vendors we had in common and markets that we shared. When I was with Chase Pitkin, I learned a great deal about the regional manager of Home Depot. I never met her, but I found out a lot about her and what her perceptions of the market were through common vendors that we held. So there's plenty of businesses and aspects in which we share vendors or suppliers and certainly customers. So these people can be resources for you, and you can offer them valuable insight as well. I would also say that, you know, no one, I hope, wants to destroy your business. But there may be some who just don't want you to succeed or to succeed as much. And the natural tendency is to ignore or distance yourself from such people. But the fact is that those are the ones you want to keep an especially good eye on. You know, in times of trouble, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Well, I'd always add to that, yeah, keep them closer and search through their pockets for spare change if you can, because you'll get a lot of insight from those people as to what they know. And again, using common vendors, customers, suppliers, etc. Again, as with all competitive data, try not to respond to every little thing that you see or hear. Keep a line of vision to the horizon. Try to assess the trends that are going on. See how the advertising may be going on. Scan the ads. Listen to everything you can find out. Don't feel obligated to respond, as in, you know, the earlier cited Facebook posting. You don't need to respond to everything that you hear, but of course, to know that it's out there is important. And the competitors you trust are of great value and should be sought out for help to build your business. And try not to draw lines or make people, especially customers, choose between you and, you know, the evil empire that competes with you, because it'll always reflect badly on you. Competition is a natural part of business, and it can be good. Again, I'll cite a Chase Pitkin example. We lived through Lowe's and Depot expanding at an incredible rate. For many, many years we competed with them. If a store opened more than 2 miles away from one of our locations, we lost as much as 20% of our business initially and settled in somewhere around 8 to 10% after a year. If a store opened within 2 miles of our location, we lost virtually no business, and in a couple of cases our business actually went up because they were close enough that they were bringing more shoppers into the area. So competition does not have to be a problem and can certainly be a resource. Which brings us to some of the information regarding pricing and sales. Now, when you go to a farmer's market or read the Penny Saver in a more affluent community, you may reach the conclusion that your product is underpriced. But then you gather information from the inner city or a depressed rural area and think that you may be way overpriced. As with so many things, then the truth is somewhere in between. You have an affluent young community, you may find that organic goods are selling at a premium, but other vendors may be selling their product for far less than you might expect, for sure. It is amazing how a market that touts local and natural offerings will have a beef or fish vendor that seems to be value priced, but they may be responding to the fact that this market brings out mostly vegetarians, so they need to be more competitive to draw other consumers. This is simple market assessment tools to be able to understand the big picture from a national perspective, connected to local quality and local trends. You know, if there's B quality merchandise, doesn't mean that it should influence top grade pricing. So you have to gather as much info as possible, but keep it properly categorized. When you gather data from, you know, a market in Ithaca or Geneseo, You may be able to compare that to Alfred or Cazenovia. I wouldn't necessarily compare it to Seneca Falls or Macedon, where there's not a big college community. But all this info is useful. Just try to keep it as equitable as you can across size of the market, location, product, general composition, general population. So, in the case of urban markets, Rochester Public Market and Union Square are both urban markets, but they each have some pretty unique elements on certain products, design, vendors, certainly pricing and traffic flow. That's worth considering and worth understanding. Understanding the range of pricing is important. It's always a good exercise if you can find them in these day and age to hire a high school kid who wants to drive their car all over town and have them go exploring for you. Write down what they see. Write down what they learn in different markets. Pay for the gas. Give the kids the gift card for pizza. And, for 20, 30 bucks, you're getting hundreds of dollars of marketing insight. Maybe you and a friendly competitor mentioned earlier, or even a non-competitive interest, maybe a vendor or a supplier of yours could share in the cost. But make sure that you give a well-defined task, because we all know how teenagers are, and it's the best way for you to get the best information. So it's a way to add staff without having to add staff.
Bob, before you move on, someone has asked if you could please elaborate a little bit more on the fourth point here.
The fourth point about connecting quality with pricing?
The last slide, yes, pricing and sales.
One of the things that I find amazing is I've gone into markets where, a bushel of tomatoes will be 20 bucks, and the next guy's gone for 16. And, I will admit I bought the $16 bushel and then only to discover that son of a gun had put the best quality stuff on the top. The rest were barely good for sauce. You have to have that insight as to exactly what you're looking at and whether or not it's equitable. A B grade product may be worth it for certain conditions, but may not compare if you've got an A grade product that people are willing to pay a little bit more for. That is the idea there. One of the great marketing tools that I've seen, or elements that I've seen used, on 11th Street in Manhattan, there's a place called Western Beef. Western Beef is a food distributor. They run a little retail shop, and just packed with merchandise. When you walk into Western Beef, the first thing you see is a display of brown bags, lunch size kind of bags, maybe a little bigger, maybe small grocery bags, if you will, and they're all stapled shut. And there's a sign on it saying $1 a bag. And for $1, sight unseen, you got to buy the stuff. And what it is it's the produce that's on its way out. So there may be a couple of peppers with a brown mark on it or a hole in them. There may be 3/4 of a zucchini or something that's been damaged or aged or is just, like I said, at the end of its useful life. My parents live in that neighborhood. This is why I found Western Beef. And my father's absolutely addicted to those dollar bags. And my mother gets all excited. Make soup, make sauce, whatever. But it's an interesting technique because it automatically removes their B product from displays. And it gives the consumer an incentive to engage in that kind of purchase. When you do competitive pricing and comparative pricing, it's really, really important to make certain that that comparison is equitable. Apples to apples, but apples that are the same size, relatively the same condition, relatively the same type of apple in pricing. It's easily overlooked when you're trying to gather all this data. And, again, it should be specific to how you conduct your business. Back to the teenager trying to assess all this. Yeah, how are we going to get a high schooler to figure all that out? They got cell phones. Take pictures. They've got insight. Have them use it. Give them a specific assignment to have them understand what it is you're trying to do. And I think the results would be helpful. Anything else, Di?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so using demographic data, like with all the data I talked about, this does have challenges involved in it too, but most of the demographic data you'll need is coming to your stand or your business every day. Just keep an eye out for it. There's always opportunities to verify what you believe to be true with some unbiased, well-founded, and proven facts. For instance, the market you attend at the senior center may seem like, you know, all of your business is coming from retired people, but yeah, you are where you are. The government keeps pretty good tabs on who is where because they want to collect our taxes, but separate story. The website, www.census.gov, can break out more information than you care to know. But what exactly do you need to know? Again, age, income, presence of children under 12 are all important indicators of a community you may be serving or wish to serve. Also, be aware of home ownership, an indication of stability, employment, relative affluence of a community, ethnic composition, which can all influence your business decisions as a small business person as to what you are offering. Remember to check the data over a period of time. Comprehensive census, as we all know, is done every 10 years and updated periodically. But it can get a little bit fuzzy depending upon the sample size that you're looking at or the area that you're looking at. So try to get the best data you can, even if it means going back 2 or 3 census periods and looking at the core census information. If the population has increased, 2% from 2000 to 2010 in a county or region, well, that's useful. But if one particular ethnic group grew by 8% in the same time period, that's a significant difference. If the population of one county grew by 4%, but a neighboring county grew by 9%, it may be an indication as to where the better opportunity may be for your business. Of course, if they're in a region where the population grew by 12%, keep looking because there's somebody doing even better. Other sources of information are the local county, chamber of commerce. There are business groups, large employers, even school districts gather and process data. They may point you to other sites or organizations if you ask and can provide critical insight. These are all things that influence the way that your product can be offered. Again, the aforementioned recipe cards may be used, the cuisine that can be recommended, the idea of what is grown and presented in your business can easily be influenced by the demographic data. Aging populations are critical, especially in much of upstate New York. And understanding that consumer not just from the standpoint of how they're interacting with your business, but what trends or elements are appearing within that group. Last time I checked, the fastest growing population being in web usage is 65 plus. The idea that older customers have different habits, but they continue to evolve. They do tend to shop less frequently, but they buy more. There are a number of them that are on public assistance, many that are not. Older customers are gardeners, so they may be growing something, but they don't necessarily grow everything. Younger customers are probably responsible for a lot of the organic boom. It's starting to age now, but certainly that is true. It's a determination of so many aspects of shopping and nutrition. You may have different challenges in introducing a new product to either audience, but a younger group, can embrace things perhaps faster. The presence of children is a huge determinant in shopping and the perceptions of consumers. And again, this could be parents, it could be grandparents. They may take for granted certain aspects of their own diet, but are much more diligent about what they feed their kids. My daughter's 26 years old. When she comes over for dinner, I make sure we make absolutely the freshest, best stuff. She's just got to get used to it. I'm an Italian father. I can't help myself. Certain cultures, may seek out product that seem odd in general, but can make money if your business is open to it and has an opportunity to expand into it. Years ago, my grandmother used to buy live chickens on Arthur Avenue in the Bronx, which is a fun story to tell over the Thanksgiving Day table. But, now the Rochester Public Market has 2 live chicken vendors. I was astounded to find that out. Manhattan is one of the fastest growing live chicken coop, whatever, development areas in the state. I was in the Barnes & Noble in Manhattan. I was looking for a book on aquarium fish. And they had like 5 titles. They had 2 shelves of raising chicken books. I'm on Union Square in Manhattan, and there's 2 shelves of how to raise chickens. That's how I found out how the growth is going on in Manhattan. But I doubt they can call them free range. I got to look into that. Anyway, the idea is that things are constantly evolving in the food world. I mean, who ever heard of bok choy or shallots or endive 10 years ago? But now they're appearing in regular food markets as well as farmers markets. And sometimes you can actually influence the product. If butternut and spaghetti squash are selling well, why not Acorn, Hubbard, or Pity Pat? Can you drive that to the demographic that you're working with? Is there an interest in exploring? If not, then not. There's no need to automatically assume this risk. But it could be worth a try if a particular market or a segment of the population seems anxious to try new things. You could certainly accommodate that. The ethnic considerations in this country are vast, and it changes from place to place, admittedly. But, in the 1960s, you'd be lucky if you could find a Mexican restaurant, even in big cities. Now you go into small towns, and it seems like everyone's got more than one. Conversely, the neighborhood Italian place is long gone, or down to 1 or 2 die-hard restaurants. There are communities, usually the college communities, because, again, the demographics will influence the trends over time that can set trends. Proof of that, I'd look at Moosewood Restaurant in Ithaca, New York. I was working at a bookstore when the Moosewood Cookbook came out, and we could not keep it in stock. This was 1979, I think. We could not keep that in stock. Now, the vegetarian cookbook category is probably the largest single subcategory in that realm. Ithaca has 2 Ethiopian restaurants, I've been told. I think that's probably an exciting cuisine. Yes, I found one down here in Virginia, too. Mideastern cuisine, certainly tapas. All of this is coming out. All of it influences the perceptions of food, the purchase of food, the understanding of it. The adjustments that people make. Parsley becomes cilantro. Oregano becomes thyme. Sweet basil becomes lemon basil. There may not be wholesale changes in this, but there are subtle shifts. Right now, Spain is recognized as a leader in culinary circles and a hotbed of innovation in cooking. Morocco is close behind. South America is starting to take on a strong reputation in this area. Professional chefs point to their Spanish background or experience. Indian food is no longer whatever they soak in curry for a few hours. It's exploding with new flavors and offerings. Now, this data may not apply to every market, again, and certainly will not be of interest to every customer. But it still explains why bok choy sells at twice the price of cabbage and is still moving, even though once they are chopped and flavored, I can't tell the difference. Taking the risk, getting ahead of the curve could be rewarding, even if you can try it on a limited basis and see the return. Your customers can also provide insight. When one person asks you if you have fresh garlic, it's a little bit strange. But when all of a sudden 10 or 20 or 30 in a day are asking for the product, well, you're seeing a trend come about. And that's really important. And it is guaranteed to continue to change. So it's another element to have in terms of the considerations that you want. All of this data, consumer, category, demographics, trends, all of this data kind of falls into an area that is reflected in your brand. And a lot has been written and said about branding, and most of it is repetitive and some of it is misguided. But at the end of the day, branding is the impression you want to leave with others. The trick of it is to make sure that the impression is consistent and that you can control as much of it as possible. Kodak, who I cited earlier as a problem company, did a fabulous job of branding. They even patented the color gold that is on their boxes and used in their logo treatment, because that was one of the reflections of brand that they felt was so important. But it's easy to confuse the idea of brand with color or logo or slogan. And it's understandable, because those things are part of what a brand is, but it's not essentially what a brand is. You know, it's a commitment to a vision that can grow with the business. It can be stable and will adapt to new opportunities. You know, if you focus on one product and never sell anything else, well, you're really banking on that product for a very long time. You know, even you know, recently you all may have noticed the fact that, you know, Monroe Muffler has become Monroe Muffler and Brake, and soon to be Brake and Car Service, because they have the understanding that they need to expand their market. But they built that as part of their initial brand. You know, Ford can say quality is job one as a slogan, but unless they also make sure to tell people that they've won awards for quality control, reduced recalls, recognized by consumer groups or industry surveys, employ techniques to train their employees, those words are a slogan. They're not a brand. Nike's swoosh is easily identified, but they got to make sure it appears on every product at every moment. Otherwise, it's just a comma kind of laying on its side or something. Broad ideas like quality or service or local are good places to start, allowing plenty of room to fine-tune the brand while focusing on whatever critical element you may want. You know, Schlabotnik's top quality Hubbard squash farm may be a little bit too specific to serve the possible future opportunities which will come to the farmer, but saying top quality farm could work, and then apply top quality prefix to everything. Top quality tomato, top quality asparagus, top quality melon. Deliver the brand message. You can manage a color scheme to continue with the Kodak idea to consistently promote your farm or product. You can use a specific image, the pig, the cow, the chicken, or gigantic squash. The two most critical parts of branding are, can you deliver the information everywhere? Like, you know, building a brand around a musical note is nice, but try to carry it off everywhere that you need. And can you meaningfully and simplistically defend what it is that you're putting forward as your brand, so that, you know, A, you're not stealing the swoosh from Nike. They won't be too happy about that. But B, is the top quality imagery something that you can carry off all the way across the board and be able to defend if challenged in any way. Broad concepts brought down to a very specific idea and reflected in everything you do, that becomes the business identity and the perception of the consumer. Because branding is visual. It is color. It is typeface. It is the type of outfits used. People are bombarded by thousands of messages, again, ideas, suggestions, bits of information every day. No matter how intelligent or motivated they may be, they remember the simplest things or the most impactful of them. There's a wide range of visual and sensory elements that can come into play. Some may be absurdly expensive. You know, 4-color price tags on every tomato, fringed in gold. Woohoo! Others may be difficult to maintain. You know, every ear of corn needs to have a smiley face, so whatever. While others could be downright damaging to your business, you know, a political symbol or some sort of socially disputed observation involved. But there are so many simple, powerful, and most especially repeatable elements that can be used. Color's the most obvious. Ever seen a green McDonald's sign or a blue box of Kodak film? No, and you won't. And if you did, you probably would misidentify it. But if I showed you the Golden Arches, you know exactly the brand. If we talk about the swoosh, you know what I'm talking about. Typeface. Typeface is probably one of the most overlooked things. But think about it. There's a reason why you've never seen the word danger or caution written in a flowery script. It's always a bold, strong message. And it's the reason. Subconsciously, we immediately identify with that kind of thing. I'm not saying good or bad from flowery script to bold rendition, but I'm saying consistency. People subconsciously register things like typeface, font, usage, and it could work to benefit the business. The use of the letters, in assembling a name, a brand, a slogan. You know, Fricker's Fabulous Field Farm is a nice name. Well, at least I think it's a nice name. You know, F4 may be something that is even more intriguing and easier to reproduce. And the full name could be a subtext to that. Even McDonald's, who, 20 years ago I worked on the McDonald's business, and if you said Mickey D's, you could have lost your job. Now they're using it in their own advertising. Branding is sensory. It's visual. But everybody knows where to find the kettle corn place at the fair. The language has to be consistent. What people hear and experience at the point of purchase, interacting with the advertising or the website, has to be consistent. Branding is everything. I've talked to major companies who ask me to explain branding, and I tell them it's the way the receptionist answers the phone. And it is. It's the constant opportunity to consistently reflect the image that you wish the consumer to have. And it's vital to business development and marketing development. How? Well, word of mouth is the best advertising you can have, but in my opinion, but there's a number of techniques and strategy that support word of mouth advertising, and a lot of them focus on the successful branding development. These quotes are an idea of that. I bought it at a farm stand at the town market, the farmer with the produce, the guy with the thing. Sure, you love it. It's great. Great. See ya. Successful branding becomes, I bought it at the farm stand where the people dressed in yellow and that young guy always greets you with a smile and a big howdy. And even into this, I bought it at Miller's. The specific brand name, specific identity that is so well established, that's kind of evolutionary. I wouldn't just come out with Miller's Farm and expect everybody to jump up and down, but by establishing elements around it, defensible elements, identifiable elements around that, it becomes that simple for the consumer to make that recommendation, and people understand it. And in this day and age, as we all know, cell phones can spread the word, social media can spread the word instantaneously, good or bad. But most importantly, again, the consistency of being able to deliver that message will reap the rewards so that people will find ways to respond to it and help build the business. So how often do you want to do this? Okay, Bob, you said at the beginning, don't obsess over this and take a lot of time, but so far you've given us about 500 hours of work ahead. No, that's not really true. Because a market assessment happens to some degree with every transaction, every day, every business situation. You develop general views. You'd be surprised how much you already know. And that's why some of you are saying, well, I haven't learned anything new here. And that may be true. I hope not, but it may be true. But it's in that application. How can you apply it consistently? And what was the last time you checked on things that you might have presumed to be true about image or competition or market conditions, or things that may be on the horizon but haven't quite hit the area? You've got to kind of do that kind of assessment, in my mind, every 3 to 5 years, or as the events demand. Trader Joe's opens in Pittsford, New York. You better believe that Wegmans and Tops knew they were coming well before they bought the property, because that's part of the market assessment. Who's growing? What's changing? What's going on? Google should be viewed every day, because if there's that emergency going on or that, event that you need to be aware of, that's where you're going to find it. But you should also be clipping articles out of the newspaper or printing them off of the web, or writing yourself notes. Put it in a file. It's not that it needs to be attended to every day. Put it in a file. Put it aside and be specific enough so that you can understand it. Keeping a folder marked marketing assessment and filling it with this stuff is incredibly useful. But you have to be diligent, and you have to be pretty thorough about what you're writing up. A note that says taters may not exactly be of any use 6 months after it's written. But something that says, new brand potato development, or potato competition at X market, potato pricing changing in the next 6 months. That gives you some sort of an insight that allows you to then act on it when you are allowed to get around to it. Once a year, at least once a year, write up these key findings. Create a true assessment that you can refer to, update as you need to. Because, again, developing these tools is probably the greatest challenge. Using them shouldn't be. You should be able to use them relatively easily and be able to point yourself in the proper direction relatively effortlessly by having some guidelines that you yourself have developed based on your experience with the product, with the farmer's market, with the stand, with the business, vendors, suppliers, etc., over time. So you got to use it. You got to follow through. Be willing to test results on the product mix, the pricing, demographics, local trends. I know in farming it's pretty challenging because, after all, you got to plan your planting and your product mix months in advance, or resort to wholesale opportunities. But that's really no different than what a manufacturer goes through, who has to retool a line, or redistribute a product, or push one thing out for another. But you could test it simply without much risk, based upon good information. Just don't test too much, and make as much as possible measurable, so that you know that it's worth testing. Don't spend the $20 to make 5. There's that classic joke about the two guys who go down to sell watermelons. They buy a truckload of watermelons for $2 a piece, and they set up in Grand Central Station and sell their watermelons for $2 a piece. And at the end of the day, one guy says to the other, "Hey, we didn't make any money." And the other guy says, "I got it. Next time we need a bigger truck." Well, don't do that. Think about it. Apply it across a spectrum of business and understand the opportunity. And yeah, there may be 30 you want to do. Don't do 30. You won't be able to assess the data or see the impact. Based on your research, you should be able to pick the best 5 or 3 or 1 and go after that. See how it works. And keep your eye on the market, because as you're testing things will change. Maybe even the test itself can influence what's actually happening in the market, which would also be a useful outcome for you, and something that you'll want to act on going forward. So where do you begin? I'll repeat myself. Get to a computer and Google the products, the name, community, farmer's market, category, whatever. Get started with that as a broad view of what's going on. Yeah, you're going to get data from Indiana and California and, Chile and Peru and gosh only knows where. But the idea is that some of it is going to have an impact right in your own community and right in your own business and right in your bottom line. So take a look. Make sure that you understand it. Start wading through census data. It is a monstrous amount of data, and it's easy to get very, very lost in it. But if nothing else, use it to affirm things that you feel are true. Again, the example of doing a market at a senior center. Well, everybody in this market is over 60 years old. Well, you go to the census data and find out the average age is actually about 35. Maybe there's another opportunity in that geographic area that can be developed. So the census data can affirm, it can also provide a vast amount of research opportunities to learn more, to investigate other elements, and again, verify data that you may find out from chambers, extension, Farm Bureau, local government, local schools. This is a worthwhile exercise in terms of beginning the process to gather the information. And it'll take the rest of your professional life, maybe longer. Some of us just never escape. It's hard to begin, but it really is easy to maintain. Because you get used to what you're looking for, you develop the ability to get your head above the clutter, above the noise, and try to get a clear view. Most especially, it allows you that opportunity to make absolutely certain that you're not fooling yourself, that you're not setting off in a direction based upon a very small set of data from your own family members or one or two or a handful of really good customers that aren't really representative of the market. You want to keep them as good customers, of course, but you want to be able to look to other things. It's disastrous, honestly, truly disastrous, never to have done this. But it's troublesome if you have assumptions that you don't check on, that you don't assess, and that on an ongoing basis you don't try to make certain that you're learning constantly from your market, from your business, and benefiting your bottom line. So I know we can't do questions, but I'm sure that there'll be thoughts and discussion to follow. I thank you for the time, and I hope that this time has proven useful to you all. I look forward to continuing the conversation online, through questions, and through further discussion. And Diane, with that, I would hand it back to you.
Okay, at this time, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in, and we'll make sure that Bob gets those questions answered for you. Dave, I think we've already sent you some questions.
So yeah, I have a few questions here. So how do you suggest organizing the data?
I think that the critical component to the data is the consumer, the person who is spending the money. I think that the first task is to be able to get to the census data, to start taking some notes as to what's going on at your business, what kind of customer you're hearing from. If you are using a website and getting data from the website, try to see what useful data can be gleaned out of that in terms of what customers are looking at and how they're reacting with the site, with the product. That, I think, is the most critical component. From there, once you have a good idea of your consumers and their habits, I think the next thing is the market data. Try to understand what's going on in one city versus another. If you're in a major city, from one location to another. Constantly amazes me the differences that you'll find in two markets that might be 10 blocks from one another in Brooklyn or New Rochelle or Buffalo, because the people are responding, the community is responding to what they find. Well, what is it about that community, and how can you best take advantage of it? Again, gather data from the consumer, now apply it to the market that you're in. Apply it to the category as best you can. See if there are any trends on the horizon about a particular group or a particular area in your markets that could be useful. But you got to start with the consumer. That's first and foremost. Then move it to geography. Then I think it's moving on to category and product, because after all, it's your business. You're already pretty adept at understanding the category and product. I don't think there's a lot that's new that you can learn. But in applying that information, there may be some areas of further investigation that could be useful.
So Bob, what do you suggest in terms of specific measures?
I think specific, you want to measure composition of your business base, of your consumer. You want to get an idea of average age. When we used to do large-scale advertising efforts we would identify the ideal consumer. Professional woman married with 3 kids who drives a minivan and is a member of the local garden club. And literally, we would get that specific so that we had this ideal in mind. And then all consumers would be related close to or in relative position to this ideal consumer. We didn't bother marketing to, 22-year-old rock band member with a pierced nose kind of thing. That was completely inappropriate, given what we saw as our ideal consumer. So, you can quantify it based upon what you're seeing happen at your market. Again, you can also quantify it by understanding the consumer that exists in your market. You can further quantify it by seeing the consumer who's shopping elsewhere. Is there a real trend difference there? And give it as great a definition as you possibly can so that that consumer becomes real to you in an absolute sense. In an individual sense, it's also worth noting the outliers. If your primary consumer is a single woman over the age of 65, that's fine. Okay, she's important. But if the next group is a young woman who comes by with her children or something, or seems to be acting, wanting more information about child nutrition or things of that nature, well, now you've got 2 very distinct groups. You may be able to build a bridge, or you may be able to better focus their needs on one and get a benefit from the other. So you're trying to define the consumer at the end of the day as best as you are. Secondarily, again, defining the market, what's going on. And you know this if you live there or live close by, or you get the local paper, or you're catching the local news, or exploring the websites, or Googling that community. You've got that information. It's a matter of really typifying it and understanding it.
Good. Are there any computer software programs that can be useful that you could suggest in helping to either capture, store, or analyze all these data?
There are a number of statistical-based software components, and there's also, you can, for your own purposes, you can modify things like contact software to, make sure that you're getting reminders to look into this, that, and the other thing. I hesitate to recommend any one of them from a standpoint that from a purely research component, they are very, very valuable tools. But they tend to be, in my experience, they tend to be a little bit too robust in terms of the options and opportunities and elements and reports that they can generate for trying to determine quite singular questions about a small business operation. It's kind of like accounting software, David. You can get great accounting software for $200, but then when you need to go to the next step, you got to spend $10,000. It's not always a good thing to have that $10,000. I have not seen statistics or analysis data or software in my experience that gives you that. It may have the $200 price tag, don't get me wrong, but it gives you that kind of $200 output that's just sufficient for your needs. It tends to be a lot more than you need to manage. So no, I don't have any specific recommendations, but again, I'm sure that they're out there or being developed as we speak.
Okay, and a question that I think also perhaps ties to social media, and word of mouth is great, but how do you get it started?
It's really funny. I used to say this at Chase Pickett employee meetings. Why do we always, 60 to 70% of the customers come through and have no basic reaction to what they've done? Probably 10% are happy they found the product, 10% are maybe happy with the price, 5% are absolutely thrilled, maybe 5% are disappointed. But by the time you boil it all down, there's the 1% that gets in your face and complains, and that's the person we remember. I never understood that. What you're trying to do here is simply assess, what that 70 to 80% is feeling. Those people are out there, and they are they are engaged. You have to move them from engaged to involved, and then involved to advocate, supporter of your business. That's a process of that repeat experience where they find the product that they were looking for or the information that they're looking for. They feel comfortable with the exchange. They value the aspects of customer service or cleanliness or expertise that is implied in your business, and you build that relationship. Those people turn into the advocate that supports the word of mouth process. They are very powerful in that engagement standpoint. From a social media standpoint, I think that it's pretty obvious, the kinds of questions that may exist about your business or your category or what have you. And I think that it's valuable, but I think the bottom line is come in and see me. Come in and buy the product. Come in and let's talk about this, because the web is kind of a squirrely thing. As Director of Economic Development in Seneca Falls, I was lambasted on the local blogs and called all kinds of names. However, that was okay. My response was always the same. My door is open. Come in and let's talk about this. Let me better understand the issues. Nobody ever did. Now, I didn't silence those voices, but I made them understand that I was willing to discuss it, and I think that that's the idea is in social media. The constant message should be, we're open for business. I don't want to necessarily conduct it all here, but I want you to come in and let's see what we can do. And that's how you build the reputation and the relationship that leads to greater business.
So the next, I'm kind of combining a couple questions here. Hopefully they will fit together relatively well. Since food is a commodity, and then here's the two parts to this. First of all, how can we decommoditize it? And secondly, how do we keep up with all the fluctuations and keep competitive in terms of marketing the commodity food?
Obviously, yes. I completely agree. Food is a commodity. Excuse me. I always chuckle by the fact that when people ask me, why'd you leave Pepsi? One of my answers is that, well, I woke up one day and discovered I was selling sugared colored water with gas in it to kids. That's what the product is. Let's face it. It's all commodity components, but it created this wonderful mystique. Food is a commodity, no question. But the idea of being able to work with a farmer, grower, expert, master gardener, to understand what the purchase is and how we engage in it is becoming more and more popular. People are expecting better information, better accountability, better expertise to be employed in the sale of that commodity. And I think that's what's allowing the growth that we're seeing. And I think that that is certainly growing by leaps and bounds. More and more people want to know more and more. There's more, popular media critical of mass food production. Sadly, there's more incidences of food problems that have been spawned by this meteoric growth. The product is still a commodity, but I would at least theorize that the process by which we come to that food, the decision making, has become a lot more complex and a lot more personalized. And I guess that's what we're trying to tap into ultimately in taking advantage of the consumer's perceptions and purchasing by understanding what they're thinking and where they're going with it. So I think that's our hope. It's not the product, the process, the category, the education, it's the changing in society that's allowing us to form a very distinct niche that really cannot be duplicated by mass merchants and packaged goods companies.
So sticking with the sort of the theme, I guess, in fluctuations and trying to stay competitive in the marketplace, what's the most effective way to organize and monitor competitor prices?
I think the most effective way, again, I think that there is some opportunity on the web, at least again with large-scale merchants, to understand where their pricing is at. Many of them advertise it on a regular basis, so look in the Penny Saver, look in the newspapers, and get an idea where they're standing. Granted, you are not directly perhaps competing with Wegmans or Walmart, but they're going to benchmark some things that you'll need to understand and be able to position against in some way, shape, or form. We've all had the experience of somebody walking into the stand and saying, "Oh my God, $5 for tomatoes! It's $1.40 at Tops." It's like, yeah, and that came from Chile. This came from down the road. Nobody at Tops eats that tomato. I serve this every night. How do you combat the fluctuation? It's the quality component. It's the veracity of the information about the product. Those are the kinds of things that allow to smooth out that kind of competitive interest. Also, take a look around. I know that, you're busy manning a market. How can you be shopping a market? Others do it. Try and gather some information about it. Try to see if there'll be your eyes and ears elsewhere for you to help bring you some information, some useful information. As a marketing person, I'm never on vacation. I go to places simply because I want to learn more about local conditions. I want to find out what's going on in the areas that I visit. You can do that too. It doesn't have to be a major disruption to leisure time, but it can certainly be part of it. And I think that gathering that data and assessing it, that's something that can be fed into a spreadsheet. That's something that can be fed into a handwritten sheet of where and when and what the data is, and can be assembled over time to give you an idea as a business owner of how much what you're really fighting against to succeed in that competitive world. Also, again, I would never underestimate the value of vendors that you have in common, suppliers that you have in common, people that you work with who see data from multiple competitors or arenas that you consider to be reputable and verifiable.
Okay. So how do we account for and manage market positioning and pricing, things like that, when events occur such as drought or other major weather events like hurricanes, and then affect the condition of the market in terms of supply or demand?
Sadly, but I think understandably, the bigger the event is, the easier it is to explain. Sandy didn't wipe out 2 farms, it wiped out thousands of acres. Irene, even more so. So that it disrupted business across a large spectrum. And people can seem to appreciate and understand that. Explaining the smaller event may be a little bit more difficult. But I think that, you can balance the possibilities by, employing different techniques or approaches. Even a total disaster in the field, may turn into an item that you wouldn't feel like you could sell realistically at a farmer's market, but you may choose to donate to the local food bank for a tax deduction of equal value. The idea is to think dimensionally about what options or opportunities may exist to alter the product, number one, tomato to sauce, or fresh to prepared or pickled in some way. You may choose to alter the pricing. It's less profitable, but it moves the product and it keeps the relationship with the consumer. I think the greater challenge is, what happens when, one of your critical markets has an event or an element that the consumers don't act on it. Rarely is that long term. It tends to be a anomaly of a storm or road construction or whatever, and you can weather that kind of short-term opportunity. In long-term opportunities, it's going to be a process of banding together with others who are affected, seeking help collectively and working through the issues as best as you can as a group, and calling upon assistance from county, chamber, market organizers, whomever is involved, to see what can be done to improve that situation.
So a quick question for Diane. Can we go beyond 11:30?
Yeah, we can, but
Okay.
according to my clock, we still have 3 minutes left.
We have a few minutes, yeah. So, so what do you have experience with, and how do you feel about surveying customers with a paper type survey to assess shopping habits and attitudes?
We've done a couple of surveys at the farmers market in Seneca Falls. I've done numerous surveys involved with a lot of different companies. I love them. I think the challenge that you face, you know, there's a lot of people who have sat down and write a survey, but you end up with about 4. Because by the time you write down everything you want to learn, you've got 50 questions. And you really don't want to tax your customers' loyalty or attention span that way. But 10 or 12 questions that really show you some insight, that are absolutely critical, and that you can easily assess are very, very important. The second part of that importance is how many surveys you're willing to do in terms of individual events and in terms of total. You can ask 10 questions and you get 300 surveys back. Well, now you've got 3,000 responses you've got to work through. Are you ready for that? Is it really necessary to go that deep? Yeah, it could be, but 50 well-placed surveys could end up with a representative view of what you want to learn. But most importantly, keep the questions, the number of questions, pretty concise and focused on what you want to do. Nothing wrong with doing 2 or 3 surveys over the course of a year or more, but each one should be kind of concise and focused for the number of questions and the time you're going to take up of the consumer and the time you're going to need to assess what you're learning from them.
Great. So Bob, can attendees contact you directly, and if so, how?
Oh, yeah, by all means. My email address is SenecaBob, SenecaBob, that's how loyal I am to the market, @gmail.com. You are welcome to fire me off an email with any questions or concerns. Also, we're going to be posting questions to the website, and I'll be responding through that as well, so that hopefully you'll be able to tune in there and see what's going on with that. And hey, if you're coming to Norfolk, let me know. I'm around and glad to show you the place.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Bob. Diane, do you have any additional questions on your end? I don't have any here.
No, that's it.
Okay. So if anyone has more questions, though, please type them into the question box on your screen, and Bob will address those. We won't have time to do them here today, but we will address those questions and get Bob's answers up on the New York Farmers Market website. So at this point, I'll turn it back to Diane to conclude the session.
Okay. Rather than typing next questions into the chat box, because we're going to be closing down the webinar, if you would shoot them off in an email to me. I think you all have my email address from having sent you the copy of the presentation. Send them to me. I'll make sure that Bob gets them answered, and we'll get them posted on the website. So with that, I'd like to thank Bob for this presentation. I thought it was really informative, a lot of good hints and tips and examples and concepts, and certainly my head is spinning, and I'm sure yours is too. So I would like to thank you again for participating. Please look for the survey coming out to you later this week, and please take a few minutes to answer those questions. It is very important to the project that we're working on here, as well as the success of the future presentations. And next week we will be doing our next webinar, which is How Smart Are You Really?, which is going to be focusing a lot on pricing. If you haven't signed up for that webinar yet, please go to the website and sign up for that as quickly as possible. It is filling up fast. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.